Welcome to the Thrive TV Show with Lauren Parsons, helping you boost your health, energy, and productivity.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Thrive TV Show. I'm Lauren Parsons, your host, and I'm so thrilled to be joined by Emma Wright today, who is a body confidence coach. So welcome, Emma.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's just a delight to be here.
Yeah, it's such a delight to connect. Emma and I have known each other online, but never actually got to speak until today. So it's like meeting an old friend that you've known for several months online. And I'm really thrilled because today we're talking about dealing with emotional eating powerfully, both for you and your kids. And there's three things that Emma's going to share with us. Two aspects of emotional eating that almost no one talks about. The important difference between emotional eating and binge eating, and how to stop yourself and your kids from going back to the fridge without having to lock it. So I know that there will be a whole lot of people, probably like ourselves, mothers that are listening into this, that are going to get so much out of this today, Emma. So before we get into all of that, I just want to ask this and that question. So are you ready for the quick fire round?
Sure am. Go for it.
So tell me, spots or stripes?
Spots.
Okay, spots, nice. Rome or Paris?
Paris.
Paris, oh, very good. Live-in massage therapist or live-in chef?
Live-in chef. Easy.
Ah, nice, okay, nice. Batman or Superman?
Can I say neither?
Yep, sure can, absolutely. Fresh salad or hot vegetables?
Oh, I think at this time of year, hot vegetables.
Yeah, nice. It's getting cooler, isn't it, when we are recording this? Would you rather be a famous musician or famous actor?
Famous actor.
Nice. These are tough ones, aren't they? Rather meet Justin Bieber or Ed Sheeran?
Ed Sheeran.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And last one, introvert or extrovert?
Absolute introvert.
Well, thank you for being here with me and chatting and sharing your wisdom with the world. I so respect that and love that. Just tell you a bit more about Emma. She is a body confidence coach who has spoken to hundreds of parents about body image and their kids, supporting them in having positive conversations that benefit their children. So as a family, they don't get stuck in conversations that make things worse. She supports families to have positive conversations about food, exercise, and body confidence, and put those conversations into actions that benefit themselves and their children to liberate them and their kids from body shame. So I know this is a really huge topic and really prevalent, and there's so many women, especially that have gone through life, that have been on diets, that have felt unhappy with some part or all of their bodies. So I know this is such an important and emotional topic. So can you just tell us, Emma, how did you get into doing what you're doing now? Can you just give us a brief overview and why this is important to you?
Absolutely, I can. I will try and keep it really brief because it could. I could spend all day just on the journey to getting here. But
yep.
Long story short was I personally have a history of knowing what it's like to have a really bad relationship with my body, and very, in my head, and not being able to find an avenue to find peace with that. And I had, in my journey to recover, if you like, or get some normalcy around food and how I feel about my body, I thought I had come a really long way until I became a mum, and at which point I was really, really committed to my daughter in particular, but both my kids, to not feel the same way about their body, to have a very different experience. And so I did the things at the time that I really thought were important, like focus really, really clearly on nutrition and exercise and telling them they're gorgeous and all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, that didn't go well, so it ended up, I ended up seeing some kind of red flags in my daughter really quite early on in her life, sneaking food, telling me she hated her fat legs, saying things that were worrying and concerning, and just fighting with me about food, wanting to eat the sweet stuff all the time, fighting about vegetables. And I just got more and more frustrated and concerned, and frustrated actually because I thought I was doing all the things that we're taught to do. And that sent me down a path of going, hey, if this isn't working for me, and I'm really committed to this working, why isn't it? And is there a way we can do this better? And that really sent me on an amazing journey myself, learning that there's so many things we can do together. They're just not in the mainstream eye. They're very much up in lofty research land, even though there's sort of 80 years of data showing us what we can do better. It's just not it's just not an easy sell, like a lot of health and well-being things are. And when I put these things in practice, I myself found this incredible freedom and just a whole different world for me, and also a whole different world for my daughter. She came home one day and she was like, Mum, there's a boy in my class and he's telling everyone he hates his fat tummy, and I don't understand why he doesn't know his body is a great body, because everyone's body is a great body.
Wow.
And it was just, and when that sort of thing started happening, I was like, everyone needs to know this stuff. We're so many of us are caught in this anxiety and shame and frustration with our own bodies, and feeling like we need to go on diets and da. And so that's how I got to, and that's the truncated version of why I do this work and why I coach people to find body confidence for themselves and their kids.
Yeah, and I like that it's so linked together, because you can see really clearly listening to you how what we do as parents and the things that we say and do and the example that we give obviously just flows over in the way that we speak to our children. So I know you've got lots of wisdom to share around that. So you said that there are two aspects of emotional eating that people just don't talk about. So what are they?
So this is such a beautiful topic, and thank you for asking about it, because it's really something we can all get something from. I think there's a real kind of negative connotation to emotional eating. Like people talk about, I'm an emotional eater, like that is a bad thing. And we'll get to the connection between emotional eating and binge eating in a minute. But I think what's happened is we tend to think that emotional eating and binge eating are the same things. So first of all, we've collapsed those two things, and they're very, very distinct. So I'll pick them apart in a minute. But really, I want to talk more about emotional eating, because we are all emotional eaters, and that's a good thing. So we are designed to enjoy eating. Eating is really, really fundamental to our health and well-being. If we don't enjoy eating, something is fundamentally wrong. We are either sick, like the first thing that goes, if our appetite goes, that's a red flag that something is wrong with us. If we really love and enjoy eating, that's a sign of good health, actually. So there's that, and so there's the enjoyment of it, and it's an absolute social connector. So we get a lot of emotional goodness from eating collectively, and we're really designed specifically to do that, because that's a time when we get together and when we talk, and emotions are good generally when we're around the table, right?
Totally. And I can so relate to that, having lived in France. I'm not sure if you know, part of my story is going on France as an exchange student when I was 18, and I actually put on a whole lot of weight because I just ate like a kiwi and lots of different things were going on. But actually by the end of the time, I'd returned back to a really healthy weight and had this really healthy appreciation of food and love of food, coupled with this respect for food that I somehow picked up off the French, because they absolutely love and respect their food. And, food is just enjoyment. I think there was a study that was once done where someone did a word association with the word chocolate cake, and Americans said guilt. That was their word that they associated with chocolate cake. And the French said chocolate cake, and they said celebration. So I really love your different take on emotional eating, to see that in a positive light, that actually if you can see that food is bringing you together and being enjoyment, that's really beautiful.
It's really beautiful, isn't it? And it really takes if I could leave this earth with anything, it would be taking the guilt away from that, because
Yes.
emotional eating is such an important aspect of health.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can teach our kids to eat with, to respect the good emotions that come with eating, if we can start there, there's a whole lot of issues we can just kind of wipe away right there.
Mm-hmm.
So the second bit that people very often don't talk about, or talk about in a negative way, like we have to eradicate it somehow from, and shame us for doing it, is because it makes us feel so good emotionally. Eating can be a beautiful act of self-care. So what I mean by that is, when we're a bit jangly, we're, like say we're at work and someone's just, told us our work's rubbish, or, a stressful event has occurred, and we haven't got the time and the space to really just then and there deal with it, decompress. I'm not suggesting in any sense of the word that we replace dealing with our emotions, feeling them, being appropriately respectful of them, squashing them down. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm talking about, in the moment, sometimes putting something in your mouth, particularly if it's sweet, just chills us out. And it's actually a very beautiful thing that we can harness. And it's why doctors for centuries have given kids a sweet when they're at the doctor, because sugar actually has a little calming effect on us that just allows us to relax for a minute. Now, this is great, and this is not a message you hear very often, right?
No,
So,
exactly.
oh my God,
the irony of it. Yeah. I always think the irony of, I'm at the doctor and they're giving my kids lollies. So I love that. The thing that I love about the show is that my guests get to help me shift my paradigms and open my eyes to new things. So
yeah,
I love that is actually something that physiologically, that eating food actually helps us to feel good, and to be able to find ways to do that in a positive way. So then you mentioned before that there's a difference, however, between emotional eating and binge eating. So can you tell us about what that distinction is?
100%. And I was going to say, this is a great time to segue into that. So I just want to say one last thing with that emotional eating. It's like, just eating something to calm down is actually far more healthy than having a glass of wine, or, or going and having inappropriate sex, or getting into drug. Some of these things that our kids might be, tempted to do. I would far rather my child could have something, eat something, just to get them through to the place where they can actually deal with their emotions, than some of the other things that are actually in some ways not nearly as demonized in our culture as emotional eating. Now, where we go wrong, and this goes to your where we get confused with emotional eating, is where it strays into binge eating. So binge eating is really a really uncomfortable experience. And I know this from personal experience. Binge eating is when you literally feel like you can't stop. And your mental position tells you, I need to stop, and you don't stop. You just keep eating. So, and that can be anywhere from mild binge eating, where you just keep going back to the fridge and you are over full, but you shouldn't, and then and that might happen every so often, to more really psychiatric illnesses where you stray into diagnosable diseases like bulimia and anorexia, and they need absolute professional care. If we've strayed down there, you need to seek professional help. But it really is a continuum. Like, we've all probably found ourselves binge eating at some point. It doesn't mean that we have a psychiatric problem,
Absolutely.
you know, or a psychological problem. But we've all probably know that experience. Now, what the difference between binge eating and emotional eating is, binge eating is really seriously unpleasant and makes us feel overfull. We're uncomfortable. It's no longer enjoyable. The emotion is shame and self-disgust and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So now, ironically, the first place to kind of start to intersect binge eating is to reconnect yourself with emotional eating, because as soon as you start eating emotionally and then you decide you shouldn't and it's shameful, you then use food to calm that sense of shame and emotion. You know, that sense of shame. And so you're now stressed and you're now using food in order to calm your stress down. And then you eat more food because you're more stressed. Can you see can you see the cycle here?
Absolutely.
That gets really unpleasant. So
so it sounds like you're saying you need to interrupt that cycle. If people are listening in that are realizing, oh, she's disrupted my life, I can recognize that cycle. So my next question is, how do people then interrupt? How do people catch themselves and move back into appreciating that emotional eating?
Yeah. So this can be anywhere from, people can listen to this and the experience will be anywhere on a continuum for going, oh my goodness, that's why I get into binge eating, when the emotion is so great. I go to the fridge, I try, and then and as soon as they know that and they see that picture, they will allow themselves to eat to calm their nerves, or for the emotion, the beautiful emotional side of it, and they will enjoy that, and they will find that actually the amount of food they need is very small compared, because when there's no added guilt or shame and feeling like we shouldn't, the amount of food to soothe ourselves emotionally is actually quite minimal. So there's people who will listen to this and they'll be like, oh, just knowing that, that all clears that up for me. There will be other people who, a couple of sessions, and I run coaching sessions, one-on-one coaching sessions, where we can go through some tools and some practices and intercept where it started and really, unlearn the behavior and then relearn new behavior. And so there's that. It may be a case of figuring out how to actually be with your emotions. So there is definitely a case where, when we've got into a binge restrict cycle, we've forgotten how to actually feel what we need to feel. So there's that can be, something we can work through in body confidence coaching. And the biggest one is, binge eating is almost always, and there are exceptions, but almost always starts with restriction.
Right.
So we get ourselves in an even worse position where we think we need to directly impact binge eating with more restriction, which is the common discourse you hear. If you binge eat, you should cut out this, you should cut out that, which is just more restriction and leads to more shame and more binging. So what I help with people with is looking at the areas where they are restricting, and it can be emotional restricting, it can be restricting certain nutrients, it can be restricting calories, it can be all sorts of restriction. And we start there and create a safe way to let go of the restriction and replace it with something far more healthy.
And I like the way you mentioned a safe way, because I think people listening in that are perhaps recognizing in themselves that cycle of binge eating, that you saying, oh, we'll just embrace the emotional eating and stop the restrictions, that would feel like a very scary space for a lot of people to even consider that. But hang on a minute, because I think so much of what we see as media messages out there is, diets and restrictions, and I've always been anti-diet, and it's just so heartbreaking to see that dieting cycle kick in for people, where they start with that restriction And, the more that you say to yourself, oh, I don't want to eat chocolate, I don't want to eat chocolate, I don't want to eat chocolate, of course, the subconscious brain isn't hearing the word don't. And so all you're screaming out for is saying, eat chocolate, eat chocolate, eat chocolate. And it's no wonder that you give in. And, in psychology, has shown us that the most common precursor to repeated action is that feeling of guilt. So it sounds like you're really helping people to kind of find the key to unlock that door, to be able to step through to having a whole new relationship with food, to be able to recognize how they're feeling, to recognize that actually eating can be enjoyable and you can allow yourself to eat. And one thing that I have heard and that I often share is that if, for example, you know that you're going to allow yourself to have chocolate every day, if that's your thing that you want, that by having an amount of chocolate that makes you feel good, it's not going to be 2 king-size blocks, for example, and, oh, I'm almost at the bottom, I'll just get rid of the wrapper and then no one will see it, Some people may be able to relate to that. But if you're having a smaller amount that makes you feel good and you know that you're going to allow yourself to have that every day moving forward, it actually lessens that heightening of that desire to think, oh, I've got to eat chocolate, because it's always going to be there, and it may, for people listening, be hard to get your head around, but allowing that permission actually allows you to move forward with more moderation. So can you share some examples or success stories?
I will. I absolutely will. What you're saying is 100% correct. I would add to what you're saying by suggesting that we actually take the limit of how much it is off ourselves to start with. Particularly, that might work for some people, but that might still come across as restriction. And I want to tell you a great story about my kids. And with so I used to be really fearful of their love of biscuits, because I just thought there was a certain number of biscuits they should eat, and over and above that was unhealthy, and all those messages that we've been told about sweet food. We really need to police our kids, because they they have these insatiable appetites and food addiction and all those messages. So when I started going down this track, I learned about the divisions of responsibility in feeding, which is really teaching your kids to have autonomy over what goes in their own body, and to take your police hat off and to put on your enabler hat. Enabler hat, that's not the right word, but your hat where you really are teaching them how to connect with what feels good, as opposed to policing what goes in or doesn't go in. And so what I did is 3 or 4 times a week to start with, for afternoon tea, it was biscuits and milk and apple slices. And for the first probably 3-4 week month, it might have even been 2 months, I don't know, this is a while ago now, so it was a reasonable long amount of time, they could eat as many biscuits as they wanted and as many apple slices as they wanted, and as much. So I set up what was allowed for afternoon tea, and they got to choose how much. And to start with, it was extraordinary what they could. I was like, I actually just had to leave the room, because I was like, I just actually.
So they were eating a lot. They were just going for it.
Going to town, because they had been quite heavily restricted, right? Because I'd been in this world of, you got to restrict in order to feel good. So slowly, the level comes down, and so now when I put them out, if they've had a really busy day, maybe it's 6 biscuits and 3 apple slices, but often it's more apple slices than biscuits, because they know what it actually feels like to eat that many biscuits is not that comfortable. The reason they were eating so many was there was this fear that they might not get them again. This might be the last time that mum actually allows it. And what happens if she doesn't allow it again? I'm going to get as many in as I can. And so when they now are totally safe, no biscuits are coming, every so often, not every meal, but every so often, they eat as many as is really comfortable. And that's not, that's usually 3 or 4 for them.
Nice.
And they often, choose more fruit than. So that is a great example of connecting with your body and going, actually, when you trust your body, no one's telling you to eat as many or not eat, you actually get to a point where you eat what just feels really right and enjoy it, and then leave the rest. Yeah. And that's where I want everyone to get to.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, I've always said eat the food that you love and love the food that you eat. So eat anything that you want, anything that you love. No food is bad food, and I literally mean that. And eat it in an amount and in a way and in a setting that loves you back. So sneaking it guiltily totally destroys the whole experience. And that was probably the biggest thing I learned living in France, was that, dessert comes out and they don't feel guilty. They think, wow, this looks delicious and amazing. And they also understand that they're not going to have lavish desserts, every day of the year, perhaps. If it's a big occasion, then you really enjoy it, but it's keeping that balance. The thing that's in the back of my mind as people are listening in, when they hear you say, take the limits away.
Yes.
And I can imagine people are going to instantly feel like, oh, but then, you don't know me. You don't know what I'm going to do then. This is not going to work for me. What would you say to the person that's listening and thinking that?
If you really do feel like you literally can't be trusted, and I know that feeling, there's no shame in that feeling. It's super, super common. Is I would say, if you don't want to feel like that, reach out, find me, or have a session. I have a free 15-minute session where we can talk about what you want to achieve and how you can achieve it, and we can put together a package to work together to get to that point, because it's absolutely doable. It might not happen this week. We've spent a long time building up these behaviors and these ideas, and these messages have come in. We might need to intercept a few of them and work through that. But I really hope you reach out, because you don't have to live like that, is what I would say.
Awesome. Thank you. That's so great. And I think that is the key, that sometimes, like you say, things that are built up over many years, sometimes we do need a bit of external help to create a positive shift. Yeah. The other thing you said you're going to share with us is how to stop ourselves and or our kids from going back to the fridge without having to lock it. So anything else you want to share on that?
Yeah. So this probably would have made no sense at the beginning of this interview, but now that you have heard about the enjoyment of emotional eating and how it calms us down, and how really allowing ourselves to do that as a good thing rather than something to be afraid of or guilty of, I now want to say, so when you find yourself going back to the fridge and you're not hungry, but you want something, allow yourself to say to yourself, good on you, Emma, or whatever your name is, you're doing something to take care of yourself. You're honoring what your body wants, and you're doing something really quite beautiful. I'm going to get exactly what I want, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to really enjoy it. And the other little trick that you might want to consider is getting a little bit more than you think you want. And the reason I say that is get a little bit more than you think you want is because if you have a little bit more than you actually really want, you probably won't go back. It's when we go to the fridge and we go, oh, I only take 2 squares of chocolate because I'm feeling guilty and I really shouldn't eat more than that. We will go back for more, because our body is saying to us, I want to feel calmed, or I'm still hungry and I need more calories, or I need something that's this, and this is what I want. It's kind of like if your body was telling you needed to pee and you decided, I'm only going to pee half my bladder out. You will end up going back to the toilet. You can't fool yourself. If you really want it, your body will get it. So getting a little bit more than you need sends your body the signal you're honoring it, you're doing what it wants, and you're being really, really good to it. And once again, I get that is different to the messages we mostly hear. And I am here if anyone needs to talk that through and figure out how to do that.
Great. And what would you say, and a slightly varied approach to add to that is, to understand that it's totally valid to meet your emotional needs in the moment, that is what, whatever your needs are, whether you're bored, whether you're lonely, angry, anxious, or stressed, or tired. What would you say to people that would recommend perhaps thinking about alternatives to food? That, perhaps you're feeling stressed or tired and you're reaching for food. What about fulfilling that need in a way that doesn't involve food? Maybe it's phoning up a friend if you feel lonely, or doing star jumps in every room in the house, or making yourself laugh in the mirror, or having a bath, or taking a nap. What would you say around some of those other strategies alongside allowing yourself that permission?
I'm so glad you asked me this question, because I think that is a really great question. And I am 100% for having a stable of things that that make us feel great. I'm not saying food is the only thing. I also would be really careful that you're not trying to use those things to avoid eating, when eating is really what your body wants. So what I mean by that is, I wouldn't use those things as a way to try and stop emotional eating. The other thing I think is really good to think of in terms of all these things we're doing, all those things you mentioned, is with all of them, like if you've just had a jangly day at work and you just want to calm down, watching Netflix, it may be just the thing that does it for you. Having a hot bath may be just the thing that does it for you. Having a cup of tea and a few Tim Tams might be the thing that does it for you. If you find yourself going back and back and back, one thing you could start to think about is, okay, so there's actually something going on I'm avoiding dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found no other way of connecting with what I'm avoiding than noticing going back to food. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. So if that's your only strategy, perhaps broadening that out and finding other things that complement it.
There is that, but the point I really want to get across is, like, if we watch Netflix to calm down from a day, or we have a hot bath to calm down for the day, those are things we normally do when that will actually work in its entirety. So the bath will just chill us out, and then we'll sleep like a baby. The thing about food that's slightly different is that it's often the thing that we do that really covers up something far more suppressed. So, for example, you've had a stressful day, you have a bath, you feel great. A different example is you had a meeting that didn't go well and you didn't say something to someone that you actually really should have. You should have stood up for yourself, and that's really terrifying. That sense of feeling jangly and out is probably not going to go away until you actually do the work of going, I'm either going to choose powerfully to talk to them or not talk to them, as opposed to, I just need to de-stress a little bit.
Yeah.
And food is the thing for me and many, many of us that tells me there's something I don't want to deal with. So it's now become an amazing awareness tool for me. So instead of going, I feel like eating, but I should have a hot bath, I honor that feeling of eating. And then I'm like, this is actually getting close to feeling like I'm binging, like the food actually isn't settling me down. It's not making me feel calmer. That's a real, like, oh, okay, that meeting I had today, I need to talk to someone about that so that I can actually get that sorted for myself. So we do need a stable of things. I'm not saying one is better than the other. But I would highly recommend, I would be highly suspicious of saying we have this other stable so that we don't use food.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And very true, like you say, to help to work through what are the challenges that are underlying causing things. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for everything you've shared. I just at this point want to just highlight, I think you might have a copy there too. This lovely people that are watching, this is Emma's Raising Body Confident Kids booklet, which is actually an amazing workbook for you as a parent to be able to work through, to help to understand your own feelings and relationship with your body, and boost your body confidence so that it can overflow into your kids. So people can obviously grab a hold of that. We're going to have all of the links down below. If people want to connect in with you, Emma, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is just to go to my website, the link's below, www.emmawright.co.nz. Everything is on there. I've got a free Facebook group you can come and join. We do daily meditations and Q&As, the 10,000 Mothers Club. The link below to that is that. But everything is there on my website as a first, access to everything.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know that you've got a real heart to have at least 10,000 mothers that are adopting these practices and principles and philosophies and sharing them with their children. So that's actually a free Facebook group that you can join right now if you're listening in. So do make sure you head over to thrivetvshow.com, where you can get all of the show notes down the bottom and all of those links to Emma's resources. So just one final question, Emma, because I really want to help translate this for parents and children as well. What would you say to parents that are listening in that really want to raise body confident kids? What's the number one thing that they can do as a parent?
I think the number one thing they can do is really just challenge a lot of the common conversations we have about health and wellbeing, the whole policing thing, and just really think about whether what you're doing is really helping your child trust and respect their own body, or whether it may be helping them feel shame or distrust for their body. And even just thinking that and being aware of that will make a massive difference in everything you do.
Yeah, fantastic. One other quick question, but just to share an example, because I think others will relate to this too. Like, for example, I've noticed one of my daughters will sometimes hide herself in the pantry to make breakfast and add what I would call mountains of sugar, like probably more sugar than there is cereal. And she's specifically doing it so that I don't notice. And when I notice her doing it, we have a chat about it. And I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on that, Emma, and perhaps if others can relate. What do you recommend in that situation? Is it something to be concerned about? What's the best approach to take?
I don't, it may not necessarily be anything to be concerned about. It could be a number of things, and it could be something that is a little red flag. But so we might need a little bit more information to figure that out. But what I want to say is, one thing, just to deal with that that incident of the hiding and the pouring sugar. So she could be just asserting her domination. So like, she just might have picked up on the fact that mum doesn't like me doing sugar. I'm going to show her I have some control over this situation. I'm just going to poke a little bit at my mum. It could be as simple as that. And if it is, the thing you can do is you can totally lean into it so that she sees that you are not triggered by it. So what I mean by that is, you could be, one morning, you could just have all that stuff on the table and you could say to her, would you like me to help you with some sugar on that? You just love that, don't you?
Yeah.
And she just might be like, oh, I'm eating all this sugar just to upset mum. I actually don't like it that much. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. That same sort of take the limits off approach. And
take the limits off approach.
Naturally.
Yeah. Or she might be doing it because she's not getting enough calories, and sugar is a really easy way to get calories. She may be doing it because she feels that's the only way she gets sugar. But it comes back to what you're saying. Look where the restriction is and what she's getting out of it, and see if you can intercept that and do something differently with her.
Great. Thank you so much, Emma. So much wisdom and such a unique outlook on things. I think that it takes time sometimes for people to process this new way of looking at it and to adopt it. So I encourage everyone to follow you and be inspired. So thanks everyone for tuning in. That's been another episode of the Thrive TV show. Go out and thrive.
Thank you for listening to the Thrive TV show with Lauren Parsons. Visit thrivetvshow.com to access the show notes and discover our fantastic bonus content. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring episode.